Hello, early birds. We'll get ready and get started in just a second. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat in the question Q&A section. I will try to get to as many as possible at the end of this presentation. And there will be a follow-up asset sent that has a lot of assets that I refer to in the presentation today. So keep an eye out for that. It will likely be out tomorrow, but it will be just in time for August recess and all your meetings with your members in your districts. We'll get started in just a couple minutes here. Yes, and for all those concerned, I do have Diet Coke today. Last time I was out of Diet Coke and everyone was worried for my sanity. So thank you to my loyal followers who are always worried that I don't have a Diet Coke in hand. We'll get started in just a minute. We're still a little bit early. I know there's a lot of people eager with a lot of questions. We'll get to as many as we can today. And then obviously feel free to follow up with me afterwards if you have any specific questions that I'm not able to get to. As many of you know, it's not always possible for me to share everything from all of my conversations, but I was on the Hill this week and had a number of really positive conversations, as well as, candid conversations about what our challenges are. So I will give as much insight as I can on this call. And we're going to talk a lot and focus a lot today on what you as members of this industry and participants of this industry, from the supply chain all the way through to retailers, what you can do during August recess while your members are in your district. And I'll give you a heads up on what assets we're going to create to help with those conversations, and what resources that are available to you as well, including myself and some other leaders from CABA that are always happy to jump on calls with you and your members as needed. For those who've joined, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. I will get to as many as I can on this call today. I know there's a ton of questions, and we're seeing some of this play out in real time because we've just had a bill introduced. But feel free to put your questions in there. I will get to as many as I can at the end of this presentation. I am going to try and get through as much as I can, as quickly as I can, so I can get to those questions. But I will try to follow up directly with anything I'm not able to touch on today. And with that, we're right at the 4 o'clock hour here, so I am going to jump into the presentation. And as I said, continue putting your questions in the Q&A and chat sections. I will be referencing those at the end of the presentation. Thank you guys for joining me again today. You guys are familiar for the most part with CABA. We do have a few people who have recently registered and are new to this, but The Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives was created about 2 years ago when the first Miller Amendment was put into the Farm Bill adjustments. And then, of course, we saw the appropriations language mirror the Miller Amendment and look to ban intoxicating hemp primarily and eliminate the synthetic products that they were seeing in the market. Most of that was driven by public safety and concern around kids. Since then, we have been advocating for sensible regulation that is similar to the adult beverage regulatory framework that we currently use for alcohol, and looking for hemp-derived THC beverages, low dose in particular, to be integrated into that system. We don't get a lot of pushback on our concept. It's about how we can deliver this and get this over the line, but we've made major progress over the last 2 years. And for those, many of you on this call, you guys know, this all started with a couple, meetings on the Hill where they were like, what's a THC beverage? We don't have to answer that question anymore. They're very familiar with not only THC beverage, but who our champions are and who our partners are. So with that, I'm going to jump into this presentation. We've just had a bunch of people join just now. To give you guys a heads up on what we're going to focus on today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's currently happening on the Hill. There's been a lot of activity this week with a bill introduction, so we'll talk about that bill specifically. And then we're going to talk a lot about what we can be doing in the meantime during August session, or August recess rather, when the congressmen are back in their districts, because this is a great time to participate, support your members, but also educate them on what's happening in regards to hemp. It's important that they hear from their constituents, and it's important that they know what we're asking for. And now we have a bill out that we can point to and a very crisp call to action. So with that, let's jump into it. First, I want to do some shout outs. This week was a long week. So was last week. We've had a number of members who have come in for various things that they have sponsored. We have groups that came in just to take meetings with their specific delegates before August recess, knowing that the bar bill was likely to be introduced, or I should say bar Craig now. Just a lot of activity. There were meetings this week. Lots of conversations. CABA is always on the Hill, but there were a lot of other groups that were on the Hill this week. WSWA was running around. The Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation have been all over the Hill over the last couple weeks, sponsoring events to really get in front of members and their staff. Nowadays is always on the Hill. Climbing Kites is always on the Hill. Drink Delta was in town. CBD, MD, the US Hemp Roundtable was here this week. There were a lot of people on the Hill this week, and it takes time, resources, money, and frankly, we sacrificed a lot of our voices. My voice is on the way out. For many of you who know me, you can probably hear that in my throat. But I want to thank everybody, because there was a lot of time and money spent on the Hill this week. There were a million fundraisers. Anyone who's participated in the political landscape before knows that right before this timeline, there's a lot of fundraisers. And I know that a lot of people wrote some checks this week of personal dollars to participate and work with their members of Congress and influence positive outcome for the hemp industry. So thank you guys so much. For those of you that were on the Hill, if I left anyone off, by all means, I did not mean to. It's been a long couple of weeks. So yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. And we will likely, and I will talk about this a little bit towards the end, there will likely be some call to actions over the next couple weeks, and some of you may be asked to come back to DC if you can, to take some meetings, very targeted and strategic, because we do not want people using their resources just to come to DC and have a couple conversations. We want to be very strategic with what meetings we take and who we are focused on, because we know we have limited resources as a category and as an industry. But thank you to everyone that was here over the last couple of weeks. You had an impact, and a lot of the feedback that I'm providing today came from a lot of those meetings. And since about 20 people have joined in the last couple of minutes, I do want to throw out there that I will try to get to as many questions as possible. So feel free to put them in the webinar chat as well as in the Q&A section, and I will get to as many as I can at the end of the presentation. So this was the timeline that I presented probably, I guess, back in like March, I think was the first time I pulled up this image. Right now we are, late July. It feels like yesterday we were just introducing this timeline and talking about the chilling effect that we were expecting to see this time of year. And I know that wholesalers and retailers are definitely starting to watch their inventory more. I know brands are looking at pivot plans and watching their inventory as well. We've seen a lot of shifts But ironically, we've seen a lot of momentum and positive momentum from a regulatory perspective in terms of conversations we've had, bills introduced, attempts at extensions. We've seen a lot of things happen over the last couple months. And it's been exciting, but there's obviously still work to do because, as many of you know, we do not have necessarily a fix in place just yet. But this week there were some shifts, and now we have some direct call to actions and legislation that we can point to as examples of regulation that work very well and effectively for adult beverage and can certainly work for the hemp beverage marketplace as well. With that, we'll jump into what do we want? Regulation. You guys have heard me say this over and over and over again. Dedication to regulation is what's going to help us get this over the line. Now the timeline, that's the tricky part, right? We've talked a lot about November 12th and what that, oh, hold on, sorry, gotta let some people in. Sorry guys, having some display issues. That's okay. All right. Regardless of November's outcome, I want you guys to know that we are going to continue to fight to get hemp beverages into the alcohol regulatory framework. So that is a first and foremost. If we hit a stutter step in November, this fight is not over. Does it become complicated? Does it become tricky for a lot of brands and operators in the space? Absolutely. But know that the fight is not over because we have a lot of support, and next Congress, you might have even more support, on the Senate as well as the House side. So, we still have opportunities. We are not single threaded, but obviously our goal is to get something done before November 12th so that we don't have to have that stutter step. So the pulse on the hill, the conversations I've had over the last few weeks, it's very much known that there is a fix needed. The question is, what is the fix and where does it go? Ideally, we would be able to introduce a standalone bill, have it, really even the playing field between the alcohol and the hemp beverage spheres, and be able to vote and push that through. We had the additional complexity of there being an election this year, which changes the timeline and opportunity for such things to get passed. But bills in general, even a perfect bill, generally take multiple attempts to get over the line. For those of you in the marijuana space or have been following the cannabis industry for years, safe banking is an example of that, right? Many, many attempts for a concept that is relatively straightforward, and yet it's been met with opposition and complexity and had difficulty getting over the line. So what we need to do right now is to drive urgency. The urgency is there, but we also need to point to what the solution is, because that's their question. What is the answer? And we have an answer of what we would like to see, what the fix is, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of groups on the Hill talking about what they think their fix looks like. And one of the things that I try to explain to a lot of people is we can have a million great meetings on the Hill, but the person after us can go in and say the exact opposite. There are things all the time that are said that derail conversations. It's why I have to repeat myself so much on the Hill, and to many people, just because there's just so much going on all the time. There's so many whispers, so many rumors, and we need repetition. So the good news is Beverage has been asking for the same fix for the last 2 years, to be treated like other adult beverages. So let's talk about how we get there from here. And I wish that I could predict the future and I had a magic 8 ball that would give me a timeline for this. But what I do know is that right now, there are a few things that needed to happen. We needed bill introduction, which we just got one out this week. We are pushing now very hard for co-sponsor support and awareness to the fact that that bill exists and what that bill entails in terms of beverage regulation. Grassroots consumer support. I've taken a number of meetings this week, and at least in 3 of them, someone, the staffer said, we're not really hearing from our constituents on this issue. And maybe that's the case. That particular staffer that said that to me in one market is a market with great regulations for hemp beverage. And it was surprising to me that they weren't hearing about that. But that goes to the need and the urgency behind us getting loud and us getting in front of our consumers about what the fix is and the fact that there is a ban coming if we don't get this fix done. And consumers can help us get this over the line and get this fixed. An extension. Yes, we need regulation, and we are dedicated to getting regulation over the line. But like I said, regulation takes time, and time is unfortunately not what we have. We are at just about 20 legislative days left before November 12th. And that is because of the election in October plus August recess. There's only so much time the congressmen are going to be able to put forth towards this. Doesn't mean there isn't work to do or be done, but that's why the urgency is so high. We need more time because it's impossible, really. I shouldn't say impossible because anything is possible in government and with this Congress. But getting a bill across is extremely difficult, and the chances of doing that before November 12th are slim to none. So what we need to do is drive support behind these bills and the regulation we're putting forth to give them comfort so they can get behind an extension ask. An extension will likely look much different than what we saw with Baird's introduction, where Baird's had just a clean extension for an additional 2 years. If we see an extension that is implemented, and we'll talk more about the CR and what we're looking for there. Hold on one second. Sorry guys, we're having some formatting issues on Zoom. The extension will likely have teeth. It will clean up the marketplace. It will create something that, gets rid of synthetics, requires, US grown hemp, all of the things that we've heard concerns about from Congress. They want to make sure kids aren't getting their hands on this. They want to make sure they're not marketed to minors. They want to make sure it's not using synthetic cannabinoids. Those are the sorts of things that seeing that within an extension makes it much more likely for them to get behind and support. So this week, as we were waiting for bill introduction, Congress has been in session. We saw a House CR put forward, continuing resolution, which many of you have heard me talk about before, and we've seen in the past over the last couple of years. And a clean CR does not change the date for November 12th. It keeps it as is, so that technically the ban language would still be upheld based on the clean CR. That did pass the House. Now we have to wait for the Senate CR. While waiting for the Senate CR, which could be weeks, by the way, it's not necessarily something that's going to pop out tomorrow, the White House anomalies list came out, and that was publicized. It includes hemp and an ask for a fix. We know that the White House's priority is the CMS program, which is the therapeutic non-intoxicating products that they defined as up to 3 milligrams of THC per serving. We know that that contradicts the current language, which is the 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. So as a result, that ask means that there should be, hopefully, a change, and hopefully it is included in the Senate CR, which Thune, in some of his communication, has said that the anomalies list will certainly be considered, and we will see changes and those included in the Senate CR. The question is, how will those appear? And as you can imagine, we are not the only group on the Hill lobbying on this particular issue, but we are doing our best to influence what that language looks like. And right now, what we need is a date change. We need that November 12th date change. If I was a betting woman, I would say that what we see in the short term is a date change that takes that November 12th date to another date in December, when they will likely vote on an end of year funding package. That is what I'm expecting as of right now, but anything can happen, anything can change, and we do have bills introduced. So depending on that traction, that might change the course there, but that is what we are expecting. And I can tell you, every group on the Hill right now, even with the support that we are putting behind the bar bill, is asking for an extension. We are united in asking for more time. And I think most of us are very much united in the fact that that extension should have teeth that clean up the marketplace, and not just a clean extension that takes it out another year, 2 years. But that extension, just to set expectations for everybody, I would expect that extension to be the duration of 1 year. I don't think they will go beyond that, and it's important because a lot of our opposition has really been concerned about the kicking the can down the road. Anything over than a year for them feels like it's just us trying to kick the can down the road until we can get regulation across the line, of course. But without teeth and cleaning up the marketplace, that does not create the even playing field we need for alcohol, and it does not mitigate any of the opposition that we certainly see from the marijuana side. And without teeth, it doesn't address the issues that Congress has, which is primarily around public safety and, of course, access to minors. Introduction. We had Barr Craig. We've been waiting on the Lawful Hemp Protection Act to be introduced. Congressman Barr and Congresswoman Craig made an introduction this week. It's very new, very fresh. I provided an analysis on the screen here. There's a lot of context and information that is included. It is a very robust bill. It includes much more than beverage. Beverage language is much more focused and similar to the alcohol regulatory framework than the language that is created for broader hemp. For example, beverage would be in the three-tier system. Broader hemp would have different rules and regulations that they have to follow by. The taxation is different. Synthetics are still excluded across the board. But what I can say that was really great to see in the beverage language was inclusion of federal excise tax, alcohol trade practice and tied house regulations, labeling and testing, work in progress protected. I know a number of people on this call are currently in states where work in progress is not protected, and therefore it's much more difficult to get your raw materials from point A to point B. Interstate commerce is protected. And again, the support of the three-tier system requiring federal permits. All of that stuff is important to even out the playing field with alcohol. But also it included a default milligram cap for beverage, which was at 5 milligrams per serving. That is what we expected to see, but that default milligram cap that would take effect 12 months after FDA has a timeline to put a dosage cap in place is important, because that was always the concern before, is that in the meantime, people were going to have really high dose product out there, and we weren't sure where the FDA would land. So having something in there that sets an expectation, I think, is very helpful. I can tell you with broader hemp, the dosage cap was a bit higher. 50 milligrams is what we were seeing, and I think that can be something that we see opposition to. But at the end of the day, what we are starting to see is regulation that we can point to and say, this is a great starting point. We already knew that a bill introduced was not going to be perfect. So this is a place that we can point to and say, here is regulation that gets our foot in the door, that starts to clean up the marketplace and really make sure that we provide safe access to the adult consumer. And it provides a pathway that allows hemp beverage, THC beverages on the low dose side to have access through mainstream adult beverage distribution and retail channels, which is ultimately our goal and something that can't currently be done using marijuana-derived THC. So the number one question I get from the industry, from people that are joining these calls, is how can I help? And now we're headed into August recess, and we have a bill we can point to. There's a lot of good things that come from us getting that bill introduced, because we can say, here is a bill. Yes, you might think it needs some work, but the beverage regulation is in a great spot, and we would really like to get this continuing moving through the process, but we need more time. The call to action is for an extension. That extension, like I said, I expect it to go from November over to December, and then potentially getting one of these bills or a more robust extension through in December. Awareness and grassroots. As I mentioned earlier, we have certainly heard from a number of offices that they're not really hearing on this issue from their constituents. And in some states that might be real. Maybe there's a ban in their state. We know that there are states that don't have robust access to these products. So that is possible. But there's a lot of markets that do. And there's a lot of markets that could be louder. South Carolina's delegation has been completely inundated with this topic. They know everything about this category. They know the regulation we want. They know the call to action. And that's why we have Congressman Fry, standing up and really taking action and speaking up on this issue. There's been a lot of traction in a lot of key markets, but we need to keep going. And that is something that you can help us do over August recess, but continued up until November 12th. I will say, and we're going to talk more about this, we've got some future slides that are going to focus on the grassroots campaigns that are available. But if you have any access to social media influencers or wholesaler or celebrities, this is a real opportunity to leverage those relationships to get consumers engaged. This would be the time, again, less than 20 legislative days to get a CR that includes an extension. We really need as much consumer engagement as possible. And influencers and celebrities, I know a lot of them are working with some of these brands, whether it's behind the scenes or publicly. Getting the consumers engaged is the best thing they can do, and they have platforms that we can leverage. So if there is a possibility for that, I really encourage you to tap into those networks, because that could really blow things open. Obviously, retail and wholesaler support is important. You've heard me talk about the Save Hemp Bevs campaign. There's a number of other campaigns. I candidly don't even care which campaign you do. You got to do one. In my mind, if you are a brand, a retailer, or a wholesaler, and you're not bringing awareness to this issue and creating an opportunity for consumers and your partners to send their letters to Congress, it's a completely missed opportunity. And it takes 10 seconds for them to send these letters to Congress. So we'll talk about that more in a minute, but please do one, pick your favorite. Then get your partners engaged. I've had a number of conversations, and I'll go more in depth on this later, with strategic partners, state associations, and some of them are like, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not trying to create any panic for anyone. Everyone needs to be engaged here. Everyone needs to be dialed in. Everyone needs to be participating. This is going to be a photo finish. We might have a stutter step in November. And I think at the HBE conference, there was a lot of conversation about preparing people for that because it is a possibility. I know a lot of people say it's too big, there's too much potential. States have started regulating it. These are all things we are utilizing to try to get an extension and a bill across the line. But I can tell you right now, there is absolutely no guarantee that this is going to get fixed before November. So when you hear people asking you to do things, do it right then, do it now, find a team member to do it as quickly as you can, because less than 20 legislative days before the CR, September 30th, this is the time to blow the whistle, if you will. State associations have a lot of impact. We have a lot of retail channels and partners that are really starting to get vocal and involved here, but the state associations can really work and be very loud with the congressman over August recess. They have a lot of influence. They have a lot of history. It is time to engage them and make sure that they are aware. And then know your talking points and who our allies are and how you can work with them. And I'm going to go over some of those pieces kind of bit by bit here, and then provide some follow-up assets following this call. Like I said, probably tomorrow, because I'm still compiling some of it from this week. But these tools and these talking points will be helpful to you in your conversations, and they really turn heads when you're having these conversations on the Hill. And the last thing I'll say here too is, hemp beverage does have a leg up on a lot of other categories. We do. Adult beverages already exist. People are comfortable with them as a category. People understand the alcohol regulatory framework. The alcohol regulatory framework is the most effective the 3-tier system is the most effective alcohol regulatory framework in the world. We do not have a counterfeit alcohol problem in the United States. Other countries absolutely do. People trust that system. That's why we are leveraging it. It's also, we want to work with the wholesalers and retailers. I don't think there's a single brand on this call that wants to be single-handedly delivering their product to each retailer. Highlighting these key points and bringing this up in conversations turns heads, and we do have a leg up in that. People are very comfortable with beverage. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, how that can be leveraged, but it doesn't change the fact that our call to action right now, collectively for hemp and the greater hemp industry, is for an extension. And again, an extension with teeth that helps clean up the market. August recess, district meetings. Congressmen are in their districts. This is the time. This is the time to meet with your congressman. Talk about your markets, their markets, your companies. Make this personal to them. I was in a couple meetings this week where they had farmland, and they were like, do you know how much farmland is in this district? When you meet with that congressman, look that information up. We are going to try to provide as much as we can, but when you are an active constituent in the state, you generally have access to different resources and probably know your market better than anyone else does. But knowing how much product is being sold in that market, what the regulations are, what benefits it's bringing to ancillary services in the state, from banks to insurance companies to wholesalers to warehousing. You be prepared with that information and how it impacts your business. The personal stories do matter, particularly when they're meeting with constituents. It is important. The potential tax revenue, huge component, particularly at the federal level, because there's a lot of things they're trying to fund right now, and this is a missed opportunity that they could absolutely be collecting on. Jobs. Everyone's worried about jobs right now. Everyone's worried about the economy. Unemployment is always a hot topic. And I can tell you there's a number of wholesalers I've spoken to that have said to me, I've got to let people go if this category goes away, because alcohol sales are down primarily because of GLP-1s, not necessarily because hemp beverage is cannibalizing that marketplace, but consumer behavior is changing. And people are aware of the fact that GLP-1s and consuming alcohol are problematic and for the consumer. And as a result, we are seeing issues there. The assets that I will be creating and sharing with people will include some stats on GLP-1 consumption, but just a fun fact, GLP-1 consumption, at least 1 in 10 people are consuming a GLP-1, and that's based on prescription data. There's a lot of people who are not necessarily being prescribed this from their data, from their medical, from their doctors and using insurance. So there's more people than are being reported. So if that's the case, we will continue to see shifts in consumer behavior. And as a result, the beverage wholesalers, they need this category. The retailers need this category to make up the difference. Otherwise, this does impact jobs. But even beyond that, we always hear about the hemp jobs, mention the fact that there are ancillary services. There are so many ancillary services that have created departments and hired people to manage this particular category and the hemp industry as a whole. So hemp jobs, and I do have a stat sheet kind of towards the end of this here, 450,000 jobs are attributed to hemp. I think if you started looking at ancillary services, we would see probably millions of jobs being impacted by this. One wholesaler told me, and they're active in a couple markets, if they can't carry hemp beverages, they're going to have to let 100 people go. And that's because of the deficit with alcohol and all sorts of different things. That's just one wholesaler. Think about how many wholesalers you guys have and are working with across the United States. So that all adds up. So making sure that you understand, or that you can share that and highlight that in your conversations. Public safety. There is not a congressperson on earth that isn't worried about public safety of their constituents. Absolutely nobody wants to be in office if a child gets access to a product and dies. And we all know that if these products are banned, if hemp is banned as a whole, the illicit market will thrive. We know this. We've seen this happen in other industries. We've seen this happen with other intoxicating products. The illicit market will thrive, and the bad actors will continue to do bad things. It will just be harder to regulate and enforce. Law enforcement will not have an easier job. It is important that we highlight that. They understand that. Everyone, I believe, understands that prohibition doesn't work, but highlighting the concerns around the illicit market is important, and highlighting and focusing the fact that Texas veto was very much received, that veto that on the ban bill was very much received because of the public safety concerns of the Texas marketplace. Dedication to regulation. So I circled this specifically. We want to be taxed, we want to be regulated. Many people do not ask to be taxed, particularly right now when there's some hot conversations going on about tariffs, but we need more time. That is very much understood and is something you should feel very comfortable saying. But we want to be taxed, we want to be regulated, we want to be in the 3-tier system, we want to work within the safest alcohol regulatory framework in the world. We need an extension to get one of these bills done. And now we have a bill that we can point to, and that's Bar Craig. The language in there, like I said, is very robust for beverage, more robust for beverage than perhaps some of the other categories. And people like what they hear when we describe what that regulation entails. So I'm going to go into each of the components I highlighted. So that was, reach out to your congressman, schedule a meeting, have those conversations. If you want to do a virtual call, I should call out myself and other leaders will be happy to join you. We will join you on those calls. Candidly, a handful of us have offered a few groups that we will travel if we need to do an in-person meeting. We will discuss that if that opportunity arrives. You can reach out to me. There's a handful of people in this industry that you can tap into. Maybe there are some that are already in your market that will join you from that call, and we can help coordinate that. Jumping into the grassroots campaign. You guys have heard me talk about this a lot. You guys know I'm walking around, not necessarily the Hill, but I'm walking around wearing t-shirts with QR codes, getting people to scan the Save Hemp Bevs campaign so they can send their letter to Congress. There are assets available there. I put the QR codes up here so that you can use those assets. But like I said, there are other campaigns, and you can customize these to work to match your branding, to fit your demographic, to speak to your target consumers, make different sized assets. For example, in convenience, we are seeing all sorts of different sizes being developed. On the left-hand side here, this image, the Keep Low Dose THC infused beverage is legal. That was is the campaign that Total Wine has developed. They are utilizing it, and I apologize that it looks like it's a little blurry on the screen. Candidly, it was a screenshot off LinkedIn, so that's my fault. But Total Wine is promoting this. They're putting this stuff in their stores. They're putting it online. They are looking for consumers to engage, and this is a great way to do it. On the right-hand side, if you enjoy them, help us keep them. This is being used by Southern Crown Partners down in South Carolina and Georgia. They are putting these on their in-store displays. They are including them in their deliveries. They have made window clings that are in the freezer section, so right outside the beverages. You see that right there. This is incredibly helpful to bring awareness, and again, it takes 10 seconds. The Southern Crown Partners group use the same QR code as WSWA, which helps because we're able to aggregate the data. But candidly, if you use another QR code or you're using another platform, as long as you're willing to share that data with all of us, we can actually collectively bring to the Hill a total number of how many consumers. We can also see what states are actually sending this, or we're seeing the response from, so we can target those members to become more active. The middle image here is an example of something that can be created, and Melissa over at IC Innovations, this is for window clings and things like that. You've seen them in convenience. This is something she's mocked up using the WSWA campaigns. These are things that you can get from groups like hers to use in store. I recommend you look at different options. Again, the more eyeballs we can get in front of, the better. And to my point earlier, I do not care which campaign you use. I just ask that you use one of them because it is a critical time. My third point was get your partners engaged. We have so many partners at the federal level. Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America really led the charge early. NACS with the convenience stores has stepped up and become more active. The Brewers Association released studies that showed that access to THC beverage was not the reason for the decline in the beer sales that they were seeing, and they obviously are manufacturing a lot of these products, so we've been working with them closely. American Beverage Licensees Group, which represents a number of the retailers across the U.S. and has a variety of state chapters. And then, of course, I think everyone on this call that I saw is familiar with BAMCO, which is the Beverage Alcohol Merchants Coalition, which has Specs and Total Wine and ABC and BevMo and a handful of others. The Beverage Wholesalers for Responsible Regulation is a subset of Total Beverage and a lot of beer wholesalers that have really stepped in and leaned in. Southern Crown Partners and Justin Ashby, alongside Rebecca Mizell at Gulf Distributing, have really been leading the charge there as well. The National Restaurant Association put out a statement saying that they were in support of hemp beverage. These are all massive groups. Getting state chapters or your state wholesaler, your regional wholesaler, your regional hospitality group, all of that stuff's going to be important. And here's why. This is one of my favorite and also least favorite from a design standpoint, but it's an AI image that was developed to kind of show the influence of hierarchy based on these industries. These can all kind of be mixed or up a little bit, but when you look at hospitality, alcohol, retailers and suppliers, beverage wholesalers, they have a lot of political capital and a lot of influence and a ton of revenue and tax revenue generated. If you can get their state chapters activated and working with their congressmen and their representatives to become more vocal at the federal level, this can be incredibly impactful to our cause and to getting that extension that we need. Provide them with the talking points that we've discussed, provide them with the ask for the extension, explain to them the bar bill and that it's something that, that regulation is an example of what we want to get across the line. And we will continue to push for opportunities to get that to where it needs to be that gets these partners on board. Get them engaged because they can heavily influence what happens at the state level, and that trickles up to the federal level. What to tell some of your partners? I've had a couple conversations most recently, some of which have been candidly kind of frustrating. But I also understand that this is different and new for a lot of people who have gotten involved in this marketplace. For those of us from the cannabis space, we're kind of used to fighting over every regulation. And you know what? When we get the regulations, we just kind of have to deal with them. In this case, we're facing a ban. This is not an option. We have to fight. We need to get We need to get consumers engaged. So a couple things that I've been hearing, and I want you guys to, understand what the appropriate response should be, or the fact that, you can point to me and say, look, the people that are in the room, and that's CABA, HBA, WSWA, BWRR, BAMCO, all of these different groups. We are saying we need to do this. There is urgency. We are at risk. If I was sitting here sipping my Diet Coke, just chilling, that'd be a different story. I'm telling you right now, we need all hands on deck, everyone. People keep saying things like, they won't take this away, too much of an opportunity, too much tax revenue, too much, all this. It can go away. They can and they will. And they're very close to doing it. We are less than 20 legislative days from not having a fix that changes that November 12th deadline. We need to, and I think it's important. A lot of people, particularly if they're only on the beverage side, are like, but no one really opposes us. Low dose beverage doesn't sell well in the dispensary channel. We don't really compete with the consumer that's purchasing the products in the dispensary channel. We're asking for 3-tier regulation, yada, yada, yada. You're right. We have a lot of things, but there are still opponents that are lobbying against different aspects of the regulation that's in place. I can go on the Hill and have a great meeting and feel really good about how I left. Someone can go in right after me with an opposing view and have a good argument, use public safety against us. We've seen that used before. And who wins that argument? It's a toss-up. It's also why we have to keep repeating what we're saying and hammering it home. But I'm telling you, there is urgency here and there is risk. So please drive that home. I've gotten some pushback from groups about if we promote the awareness campaigns about the ban, will scare off customers. I don't really understand that concept, and I'll tell you why. In November, when the ban, was announced and that we had 1 year, we saw a huge spike in sales. My biggest concern with consumers right now is when they keep seeing products on the shelves, they just assume the problem's already been solved because they're still there, they're still available. Without the awareness, they're not going to speak up. But I can tell you, if I didn't tell my mom that one of her favorite products, whether it was bonbons or THC beverages, were going away, and then one day they were gone, she'd be pretty ticked off. And she's a core representation of our target demographic. So tell your retail partners, if they're not aware that this risk is real, let them know. They will probably see sales spike, if nothing else. But if we don't, the one thing I can guarantee you is if we do not engage our consumers, the category is absolutely at risk. If we do nothing, we are at risk. So I encourage you, with less than 20 legislative days left, get your consumers engaged now, get your retailers on board. If anything, they might be able to also leverage this for local regional PR. So maybe there's a way to drive foot traffic to their stores as well, but they need to be engaged on this. So please drive that. My favorite one is it'll get fixed. Guys, I'm telling you, the only guarantee is if we do nothing, it will be banned. So do something, get your partners engaged. I know everyone on this call and people that register for this call know this already. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but someone else will fix it. It's not an acceptable excuse. There have been people working on this for years, and there's still more champions we can get on board. And we are seeing traction there, but we need to keep driving that home. So I hate to feel like it's Diana's soapbox day, which is kind of what this feels like, but it's really important we get people engaged. So you're not going to hear me back down on the urgency component today. Know your talking points. There's a number of things. I've touched on some of these. I have this up on the screen. And like I said, I will absolutely be sharing a document that has these talking points built out with more resources so that you can actually include links and follow-up information so other people can do the research for themselves. But I want you guys to be prepared with some key talking points. Alcohol regulatory framework, most effective alcohol regulatory framework in the world, hands down. It hits, and people are aware that we don't have a counterfeit alcohol problem. And when you talk to people, like, have you ever traveled to China, and people talk about how there's a concern there, it does resonate. Congressmen, staffers, they're all humans, they're all consumers. So point those things out, because we are asking to be put in the best regulatory framework in the world. Number one product bought alongside hemp beverage. This one just surprises people. And actually, I'm going to give a shout out here to Dave Thomas from Drink Delta. He does it in a really fun way with his conversations. He's like, what do you think the number one product that's bought with a hemp beverage is? Most people pause, kind of look at each other. They're like, pizza, chips, because naturally they go for the snacks and the munchies. Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio, Veuve, Prosecco, and Buffalo Trace are the top beverages that are being purchased alongside hemp beverage, which goes to show that we are not cannibalizing the alcohol space. It's just another option. It is filling shelves and spaces that the consumer is looking to fill, and so is the wholesaler and the retailer. But it always catches them off guard when they hear Pinot Grigio because it's a direct indicator to who our target demographic is, which are, as we know, our top demographics are 30 to 45-year-old female, 55 plus. Those consistently are the top two categories. It is not what they picture when they hear cannabis or hemp. But when you start pointing out Pinot Grigio, Veuve, it shows a different story, right? It shows the demographic that we are working with. So make sure to highlight that because it hits different. Where can these be bought? Know your partners. Know your partners in that marketplace when you're meeting with your congressman so that they know, oh, you can get this at Rouse's. Oh, you can get this at Spanx. Oh, you can get this at Total Wine. They're intrigued by that. Dropping those names is important. I have a follow-up slide that's got some logos we'll touch on, but know those partners because, again, that hits home. Specs, for example, everyone in Texas knows what Specs is. Not everyone in Congress knows what Specs is until now because of BAMCO, so everyone does now. But Total Wine in a number of markets, those names carry so much weight. So know who your partners are, know who your regional partners are in that district. That is important. Wholesalers have a ton of influence. They've been very engaged with their congressmen. Know who those partners are. Take the meeting with those partners. The partnership with VFW for hemp beverage. So the Veterans of Foreign War have bar and restaurant locations across the United States, and they had signed up with Torch Beverages. They had done a deal with Torch Beverage to have hemp-derived THC products sold at their locations in states where it was legal. This is one of those things where they're like, really? No one likes to take anything away from veterans. Veterans are obviously a core demographic for many of these brands that are operating right now. But the fact that a partnership was developed with this emerging category with a group like VFW really catches people off guard. And a lot of people did not see that announcement, which candidly shocked me because it was just such a big boom within our sphere. So it just goes to show that even though the hemp and cannabis industry is talking about it on LinkedIn, got to go further than that. LinkedIn is not the world. LinkedIn isn't Instagram. It's not TikTok. It's not any of those platforms. It is very important that we get outside of our bubbles and then bring it to the congressmen so they understand where we are with all of this. Hemp jobs, I talked about this one a lot. You've heard me say this before. They estimate that we're at about 450,000 hemp industry jobs are at risk here. But again, with ancillary services, it puts this in the millions. So talk to your partners, get some of those stats and facts, use those, and make it personal within that state when you're having that conversation. Fun fact, and I'll give a shout out here to Harry Rubin, who sent me an article that I had not seen before. I had heard this, but there was an article recently, and again, I will be sending this in the follow-up assets. Hemp can be used to clean up soil. So for farmers that need to clean and rejuvenate the soil so that they can grow crops, whether they're growing hemp or something else, hemp can actually clean up the soil and save farmers up to $1 million per acre by being the solution versus the other chemical processes that you would have to use to refresh your soil. I had no idea. Candidly, I'm not doing the best job of explaining it, but that's what the article's for. Dave from Drink Delta also explained that cocoa is similar, but hemp can be used for that. And hemp is right now a product that farmers are obviously growing, but more farmers might be interested in growing too, and it can help them, clean up their soil. So just another reason why we need to be more educated on hemp, because it is an incredible opportunity, and we need to make sure that we're not limiting the growth with, poorly informed regulation, to say the least. But that's just a fun fact to be able to throw out there. And if you're in a state that is growing hemp, South Dakota, Georgia, Montana, states like that, Texas, this is an important thing to throw out there. National Restaurant Association, they obviously, as I mentioned, put out a hemp beverage statement. One thing I also want to call out is 42% of their members did not report a profit last year. That's huge. We know that restaurants are also taking a hit with are also taking a hit with alcohol because of the GLP-1 situation, but also, as you can imagine, food orders would likely be down, or at least smaller portion sizes are now being developed by or provided so that there's less waste. But restaurants often make a majority of their profit, sometimes over 50% of it, from adult beverages. So if people aren't drinking them, their margins are going much lower, which is where that 42% number comes from. So again, in the follow-up materials, I'll include the link and a couple more additional key bullet points, but it's really important to understand that. Point to what the even playing field looks like. Many members of Congress don't know the details of other states that are doing the work already and have already implemented regulation. I always highlight Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, but Connecticut, just expanded their regulations and increased their dosage cap from 3 to 5. Also has very aggressive taxes, and again, that market has continued to thrive. Louisiana's got a great marketplace. South Carolina has a great marketplace, obviously not regulated just yet. We're working on it, obviously. We've been working on it for a long time. But point out what's happening in your market and what you're trying to get across the line. Point out the fact that you almost got a bill across the line and what you were asking for. Make sure they're aware of all of the efforts that are going into getting regulation, and then highlight what's working in other markets like Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, but also feel free to point to other markets like Connecticut, Louisiana. There are some really great markets out there. Obviously, Minnesota's out there leading the charge, but make sure you point those out because a lot of congressmen are not aware of what other markets are doing. Milestone after milestone. We see this stuff on LinkedIn. We see this stuff everywhere, and consumers are starting to see this stuff everywhere. They see that, Dadgrass wins BevNet. This is the third time hemp-derived THC, or I should say just THC beverage, has won the BevNet Best New Beverage Showdown. We've seen the data from Nielsen and a number of groups showing the growth of this category. We've seen that Target has expanded into other markets like Florida, Texas, and Illinois. We've seen that Navy Pier, United Center, all these other groups have official beverages. Lollapalooza just announced that Senorita is their official THC beverage. We know this stuff. We need to make sure that we are mentioning these mainstream groups and entities and partners with our congressmen, particularly if you are based in any of those markets. Grand Ole Opry offering THC beverages. All of those things are important to mention because they hit a nerve. Because again, all of these congressmen, staffers, they're all consumers. They're all people. And when you name the partnerships, you don't get those partnerships by being a black market, illicit market operator. You get them by proving that you are a trusted partner, that you are pushing for regulation. You do that by showing them supply chain documentation, testing records, all of that. That's critical. So keep highlighting all of those components. Mention that Albertsons through Jewel Osco is testing hemp beverage in Illinois. The National Restaurant Association, again, getting lots of shout outs today. But staffers and congressmen, they all eat out at restaurants. They all have restaurants in their marketplace. So that's why that stands out so much. Lollapalooza, people smile when they hear of festivals and concerts and things that bring back good memories. Mention those things because it, again, makes it personal, brings it home, and shows how mainstream this is going. And again, why we should be able to get consumers more engaged. If you are participating in a consumer-facing festival, and I'm just throwing this out there because Lala's on the screen right now, put signage, get those attendees scanning that QR code. Get them saying we want to keep these and we want these to be regulated like other adult beverages. We want that. We are going to continue supporting that momentum, but use every opportunity you can to get in front of a consumer to do that. And many of you have thousands and thousands of consumers that you can email or reach through your social media. Continued talking points. So some of these are a little heavy hitters here. Attorney General letter. So there is an Attorney General letter led by Montana's AG, Austin Knudsen, that supported this letter specifically, said that they supported regulation of hemp-derived THC beverages. It was signed by other AGs from Georgia, Missouri, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Utah. There were some others that were certainly interested, but obviously did not all sign on. And I know that there's probably a lot of people on this call thinking that doesn't sound like a lot. We've never had an AG sign a letter for intoxicating hemp in this way. We've never had someone sign on saying we are comfortable, or an AG sign on saying we are comfortable with hemp-derived THC beverages. This is a first for us to have something like this, and it's against the grain from what they've seen before from AGs. This is proactive. We've seen letters from AGs before, usually asking for the ban to be put in place or banning synthetics. We all saw the letter last year. This is a first, and it is something that we can leverage and send around to various members of Congress so that they know it's out there and be aware of it. Prohibition doesn't work. There are a couple studies, and obviously the Texas veto I mentioned earlier, but the convenience store industry supported a California menthol ban study where California banned menthol in their cigarettes. And when they did that, they did a study with a garbologist, which is a literal going through the garbage study to see if, in fact, they were mitigating menthol products from being sold in California. And instead, they found that there was a very minimal impact. And instead, they were finding illicit product coming from the cartels and all over California and other states as well, not just along the borders. So I think that I'm going to screw up the numbers a little bit, but I think, at one point, menthol was 24% of the marketplace, and after the ban, it went to like 22. So again, not effective. And again, the product that that 22% they were consuming, it was untested, unregulated, coming from the cartel market, not a regulated space within the United States. So things like that are important to be able to call out, because it just supports the prohibition, that prohibition doesn't work. And then the other thing to make sure to highlight, and again, this is an advantage that Beverage has that others don't necessarily have to point to, but low-dose Beverage does not compete with the marijuana dispensary channel. I know it. I still operate on the marijuana side, another part of my business, obviously, but low-dose THC Beverage was less than 1% of the dispensary channel. Beverage as a whole was less than 3 to 5% of the cannabis dispensary channel. We are not a big factor in that marketplace for a number of reasons. One, the cannabis consumer going in there is very different than the low-dose THC beverage consumer. Very different. They're generally looking for different types of products, usually higher potency. They're usually more familiar with cannabis as a whole and just looking for a generally different experience. But on the dispensary side, Beverage takes up a lot of space in comparison. We are a much lower price point, we are a much lower margin, and we want things like refrigerators. You guys know the dispensary channel and the retail locations that have been set up, with the exception of a handful, aren't necessarily equipped to have refrigerators and have the space in their vault for our products. So we actually don't compete directly. Make sure you bring that up in your conversations with congressmen as well as staffers. For many of these markets where we are thriving, like a South Carolina, they don't have an adult rec market. Tennessee doesn't have an adult rec market. When you don't have that, they don't have something to compare it to. So point to states like California, Washington State that have adult rec markets where beverage is still a very small percentage. And the products that are sold in that marketplace are very high dose and, again, appealing to a very different market. We have always, as CABA, always said that the pathway forward for these products is going to be based on dosage and form factor versus hemp versus marijuana. Low dose beverage, where that should be and where that's accessible, is alongside the other adult beverages that adult beverage consumers want to purchase. High dose products will always perform well in the dispensary channel, and they should stay there, particularly right now while we are introducing new consumers to this. And there's some you have to learn. You have to learn your tolerance, and it's very different. There's such a wide tolerance spectrum. With alcohol, you've got windows, but everyone kind of knows and they're very familiar with it. Our consumers, particularly just adult beverage consumers, don't necessarily know the difference between a 5 and 50 milligram beverage. But I bet you a consumer going into a dispensary understands the difference between 5 and 50, which is why the higher dose belonging and performing well there certainly creates, I think, safe and responsible separation while we're at this stage of educating the consumer. The other thing I want to touch on, because I continue to hear people say, well, we're going to focus on a state level approach. I just want everyone, particularly the brands on this call, but also the retailers, to understand how difficult And the fact that this is not a wholesaler or retailer friendly solution to a degree, particularly if you're dealing with adult beverages. It's one thing if you're dealing with a hemp shop, the way they operate, they might be a little bit more flexible. But when you're dealing with a Total Wine or, a Specs or a Circle K, once these products, let's say the ban goes into place, after November 12th, so November 13th, anything over 0.4 milligrams per container is Schedule 1 drug, which means 280 taxes, which means credit cards won't process sales, which means your wholesaler's not going to touch it because they have a federal license and that would violate that requirement. Retailers would have to start collecting cash probably, and probably have a separate cash wrap. Not to mention the taxation issue with 280 penalty tax and not being able to have deductions. This is a very different market and it would be very difficult to execute. Is it impossible? No. But you are going to have conflicting federal and state licenses. It is going to be a very difficult program to operate. And sometimes I think people who haven't operated on the marijuana side before do not know how complicated it is and don't realize some of the challenges that would come with trying to make a state level program work with a Schedule 1 product, which is what this will become if the ban goes into place. I also want to call out that we are not single-threaded. Pre-introduction, we have talked about a beverage-only bill. It was publicized in Marijuana Moment. It's a potential vessel for change and has not been introduced yet. It's still being worked on, but we are very bullish on getting this introduced. Has very similar structure to the beverage portion of Barr and Craig's bill, the Lawful Hemp Protection Act. But when we talk about beverage, we get a different response than we do other categories. And it's important that we make sure to reiterate that we are dedicated to getting regulation through and that we are willing to work with different solutions to get something over the line. Beth Van Dyne is someone we've been working with who's very engaged with us on multiple levels and has taken a lot of feedback from a variety of our partners and groups. I know that this week, myself, Willie's Remedy, a handful of others met with her. And, it's just great that we have such a great champion coming from the state of Texas that is interested in particular, supporting beverage. But it's important that people on this call know that this is an option and this will be something that is introduced and we will continue to support, and it does not harm any of us to support both bills because both bills are trying to get the same thing accomplished for beverage, which is putting us in the adult regulatory framework. Allies and challengers. I do like to highlight the fact that we do have great partners, and I've talked about that a lot on this call, but we do have opponents, and we do need to continue showing that we are trying to even the playing field. We also are looking to work with our alcohol partners. The way we speak about them publicly needs to be that we are looking to play in the same sandbox. We know that not all of them believe that we are as dedicated to the regulation that we are. But we need to show them through our actions. And when we speak about our opponents, we need to speak respectfully about them because they are going to be our partners. At the end of the day, the alcohol industry is getting this over the line with us. And I believe many of our allies on the alcohol side are working with us and having conversations because they want to see this succeed. But they do want the even playing field. So that's why when you see a bill that comes out like Congressman Barr and Craig's, and what we hope to see with Van Dyne's is an even playing field. And the more support we throw behind that, the more we support the 3-tier system, the more we push for tight house and trade practice laws. That is how we earn the respect and trust of that group. And it's not that we're just saying it, we are doing it by actively supporting those bills and the regulation we need. So keep that in mind when you're doing media, you're being interviewed by various groups. It is important that we show the collaboration between the two. And I'm putting my hands together, kind of laughing about that because it's exactly what Trone did when he was being interviewed at WSWA. We are partners. We are working with the alcohol space. We need to, in order to get this over the line, and we want to work in that industry. We want to be working within the 3-tier system. We want to work with their wholesalers. We want to be on the shelves next to them. They are our partners. we do need to show through our actions and words that we are dedicated to that regulation. So please keep that in mind as you continue to have conversations. Many of you have relationships on the adult beverage side. Make sure to reiterate the fact that we are trying as hard as we can to even the playing field, which we know is something that they want. I do want to make sure everyone knows this is available. We've talked a bit about it over the last month. There's some new data, and this is the first time that it's coming out of a system like VIP. 26 suppliers. This tracked the sales through the wholesale level, which is how a lot of the which captures a lot of the deliveries to hospitality as well as retail. So it's a little bit broader than what some of the other platforms that track it at the point of sale. So just a lot of interesting stats here. We believe this is the floor, not the ceiling. So the numbers might seem a little lower than you expected, but again, this is the beginning of capturing this data, and only in certain key markets. But there were a couple things that we did see. Distribution increased over the 2024 period to 2025 by 129%. There's massive industry growth over 133%. And something that makes me happy all the time is that the lower dose products are growing in market share. Because I've always said that if we don't focus on some of the lower dose and make those accessible, we will miss out on an entire target demographic that wants lower dose sessionable products. So seeing that in data form from this is huge, and hospitality loves the lower dose products. So keep that in mind if you're a wholesaler, retailer, or hospitality group on this call. The lower dose products, they will bring that sessionable volume that you're looking for. And probably the most somber thing is to look at this, but also understand that there are less than 20 legislative days left. So there are about 112, this was literally today, I screenshotted that, 112 days until November 12th, and the ban takes effect. But the number of legislative days is less than 20, which is why my urgency is so high and why I'm almost losing my voice after 2 weeks of aggressive Hill conversations, but really positive ones. So I want you guys to know that I know it feels like progress is slow. Candidly, a lot of things with government and bills and getting bills passed is slow. It takes time. And unfortunately, that's the one resource we really don't have. So that's why the urgency is there. But we are making headway. We are having good conversations. We do have a bill introduced, which means we have language we can point to and back up our ask for an extension. The entire hemp industry is asking for that extension united. And we will continue to do so. And if you get the opportunity, please thank Congressman Barr and Congressman Craig for introducing the Lawful Hemp Protection Act. It is a step in the right direction and an opportunity for us to show how we would like beverage regulated. So on that note, kind of already touched on a lot of these. So we'll jump into questions because I know I'm running a little over time here already. So I'll try to get to as many questions as I can. And again, the recording for this will be sent out. We will also share the slides as well. Soil remediation. So we did get a question about a House bill, being introduced and why there are no Senate sponsors with the House intro. So the way it generally works is when you have a Senate, the Senate has to carry the bill or introduce a similar bill. So the Senate is likely to see more support from an upcoming bill, which I'm not necessarily going to go too in depth on because the language hasn't necessarily been put out. But I think a lot of people on this call were on the HIFA call where Senator Sheehy attended. He is very adamant about supporting a safe access program. So we will continue working with Senator Sheehy on language and hopefully see introduction of a bill that complements the Barr-Craig bill. And Jack Weibel, thank you for putting the number out there. It is 9830 is the House bill number. So if you're looking for the language, you can find it online utilizing that. And let's see. We definitely need Justin Ashby Fry for Senate. There's been a lot of things. I wanted to focus this particular call on what we can do as individuals, to put support behind the bar bill, but also meeting with our congressman. Many of you know that Congressman Fry, and I should have mentioned it when I talked about him earlier, is now running for Senate. We saw him this week and had some great conversations about what he is looking to do. We support him in this and feel this is a very exciting opportunity for us to have another champion on the Senate side come January. So Fry for Senate all day. I do agree. I would love to do a side-by-side study of GLP-1 impact on the consumption of alcohol and THC beverage. I think it would be very interesting to see. It could even be a poll. I think there's still a lot of people, and this is just my opinion. At this point, I think there's still a lot of people who don't talk openly about their GLP-1 consumption. People don't go to restaurants and say, "Oh, I'm not drinking because I'm on a GLP-1." They just order something else, right? So I think sometimes people are still a little. I think there's a stigma around it still, and they're a little ashamed to admit, but I think it would be very interesting if we could get more data on the impact of GLP-1s, not even just for alcohol and THC beverage, but how it's impacting other industries. I mean, snacking's got to be down. I'd just be interested in understanding more about how it's impacting general consumer consumption behavior. Any other questions? Let's see. I'm going to pop into the question side. There was a question about the anomalies list and if it actually covered beverage or if it was CMS therapeutic carve-out only. It specifically called out the CMS therapeutic program. Same language that we've seen before, not necessarily anything new. So again, our job is to influence the language that is put in the CR for hemp. Right now, I think there's still some development on the White House side in the CMS program in terms of what they would like to see for the CMS program. I think they're still developing how that language would be written. And so as a result, I think they also need some more time to get that done. And in the interim, the CR could cover some other requests for beverage, but it's up to us to influence that. And again, that's why we need the consumer constituent reports. It is very important that we get them speaking to congressmen and making sure the staff knows how important it is to the economy, to the consumers there and the constituents. At the end of the day, that's going to be really, excuse me, that's going to be really important. There's a lot of questions around the taxes. Right now, there's double taxation in the Barr-Craig bill. I think there's a couple reasons for that I'm not, I don't feel comfortable saying on a public call. I'm not entirely, I don't have a for sure answer. If I did have a for sure answer, I would share it. I've heard a couple variations. There's a few other groups looking at different rates or methods of taxation. But one thing I'm going to say on this call is candidly, I'd pay the tax to keep us alive. And I think that's the mentality we need to take here. It makes it more difficult for sure. And it's not necessarily something we want to hear. But right now we are facing an existential threat with less than 20 legislative days to get a fix through. If we get to debate the tax later, that means we're winning on other fronts. In terms of the bill and who might be lobbying against it, I mean, I think the bill is very inclusive for other categories. So I would expect that some of the marijuana industry isn't happy with some of the dosage caps that were put in place or recommended for other categories. I don't think the beverage component is necessarily getting any pushback, but Barr kind of talked about the fact that he was anticipating that there would be some pushback on his bill from the marijuana side. There may be others, but I think inhalables and edibles, that's a huge part of the marijuana dispensary market, right? So I think naturally we kind of assumed that we would get pushback on that front. I think I got most of the questions here. Any other comments or thoughts here? Question on when do we expect the Van Dyne bill to come out? I really stay away from putting specific days out there, but I can tell you she is bullish on getting it out quickly. She's aware of obviously the deadlines here. So when I say near future, I mean very near future. And I am excited to, I am excited to see that get introduced because it will be met with, I think, a lot of support. And I think candidly in the conversations I have on the Hill, there's a lot of understanding of what Beverage wants. We've been very clear with our ask. And as a result, I think, Beverage is definitely a category that can get more support than other parts of hemp. I think our pathway forward for making adjustments is, at this point, the CR is our best vessel. So in terms of going after SAFE or the Farm Bill or other form factors, the CR is our best vessel. There will be other opportunities, but the CR is our best vessel right now to attach something, particularly with the election. There's just not a lot of stuff that's going to get through. It's going to be, I think it's going to be tough to attach it to something else. And I do think that we have a decent shot of getting an extension because of other groups that need some more time, like CMS. I think that, they want to get that language right too. And I don't think rushing rushing language or getting language wrong is kind of how we ended up here. So I think ultimately there's a lot of attention to detail. And unfortunately, I think that's led to some delays in terms of legislation being introduced. It's because we want to get the language right. So a lot of time and dedication, but appreciate everyone for joining this call. I know we ran long, a good solid 10 minutes there. Thank you to James, who also said tax is the least of our worries. I do believe that state cannabis associations may be actively lobbying against these bills. I think that it really depends on where the guardrails are. I think that we need to come up with boundaries that support both markets. I think that's the only way to mitigate the opposition. I think we're all aware of the support that the marijuana industry has shown at the federal government. They paid a lot of tax revenue. They have a lot of political capital. So I think we have to really strive as an industry. And when I say industry in this case, I mean the cannabis industry needs to look to strike a balance of what we believe can go through mainstream channels and what we believe can go through a dispensary channel and continue to thrive and support both markets. I think we all agree that in the long run, the hemp versus marijuana conversation and debate is temporary. THC is THC. Ultimately, I think in the future, the regulation will be written differently, and we will have regulation that talks about THC dosage and form factor, determining the pathways to market. And hopefully, in the future, we're talking about descheduling. Rescheduling certainly is an improvement and step in the right direction. I don't think there is an appetite on the Hill for descheduling right now. I think that's too big of a bite off the apple. I would love to be wrong about that. Descheduling opens up the market in a very big way for a lot of our retail partners, and obviously for us. And it changes the argument and the debate and the fight between hemp and marijuana. I think we have a lot more collaboration if we can see descheduling in the future. I just think that it's a big bite of the apple that is too much to see right now. All right. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. If you guys do, please feel free to follow up. Keep an eye out tomorrow. I'm going to try to get those assets out with a number of the resources and information attached to those key talking points to have ready. And any other details or support you guys need, please reach out. All of our associations, particularly on the beverage front, WSWA, BWR, BAMCO, all of us are collaborating and working together and having conversations on a regular basis. If you are trying to have a meeting with your congressman and you are looking for additional support or people to join those calls, many of these members and staffers will take virtual calls. We can join those calls and be additional support for you. So don't hesitate to reach out, and whether that makes sense for me to join the call or Glenn from Plift or Justin Ashby from Southern Crown or a retailer, like we will figure out a way to get you additional resource and support on those calls, because those calls can make or break, and you're the constituent. You share the personal story. We can come from the more government affairs, higher level experience of the conversations we're having at the federal level. So leverage us and reach out. We will do what we can to help. And thank you so much for once again tuning in to another one of these monthly calls. I know they're hefty. I'm going to go drink some tea so I have a voice for tomorrow, for more time on the Hill and more meetings. But it's all good conversation, lots of good support. And yeah, I'm here if you need me. Keep an eye out for the resources to be sent out tomorrow. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your Thursday.